There are places in history where silence was not a choice, but a matter of survival. Deep in the heart of Louisiana, during the darkest days of American slavery, stood a plantation known among the enslaved as the Closed Mouth Estate. This was not its official name. The property was registered as Whitmore Plantation, a sprawling cotton empire that stretched across thousands of acres of fertile delta land. But those who lived and died within its boundaries knew it by another name, whispered only in the most trusted company. Because at Whitmore Plantation, speaking the truth did not lead to justice. It led to disappearance. And what you are about to hear is the documented account of what happened behind those walls, pieced together from testimonies, letters, and archaeological evidence discovered more than a century after the last scream echoed through those halls. This is not a story for the faint of heart. This is history, as it truly was, raw and unfiltered. The year is 1852. The Mississippi River runs thick and brown through Louisiana, carrying steamboats loaded with cotton bales south to New Orleans. Along the river road, between Baton Rouge and the smaller parishes to the north, sits one of the most productive plantations in the state, Whitmore Plantation. The main house rises 3 stories high, a monument to Greek Revival architecture with massive white columns that can be seen from the river. The house is painted brilliant white, almost blinding in the brutal Louisiana sun. Wide galleries wrap around both the first and second floors, providing shade from the relentless heat. Inside, crystal chandeliers imported from France hang in the main hall, mahogany furniture, silk drapes, Persian rugs. Everything designed to project wealth and respectability. But step beyond the manicured gardens surrounding the house, and the reality becomes clear. Row upon row of wooden cabins stretch toward the cotton fields, each one barely large enough for a family to lie down. The cabins have no windows, just wooden shutters that provide little relief from the mosquitoes that swarm up from the nearby swamps. The gaps between the boards are wide enough that rain pours through. In winter, the wind cuts straight through. Behind the cabins, the cotton fields extend as far as the eye can see, a sea of white under the merciless sun. This is the domain of Colonel Augustus Whitmore. He is 48 years old in 1852, a man of medium height with sharp features and eyes that seem to calculate the value of everything they see. He inherited the plantation from his father, but has expanded it significantly, purchasing adjacent properties and increasing his enslaved workforce to over 300 people. In Baton Rouge society, he is considered a respectable gentleman. He serves on the parish council. He contributes to the Baptist church. His wife, Margaret, hosts elaborate parties where the finest families gather to discuss politics and commerce. But Colonel Whitmore has a reputation among those who know the plantation intimately. He is obsessed with control, not just the control necessary to run a profitable operation, but absolute control over every aspect of life on his property. He has implemented a system of rules that govern not just labor, but every word spoken, every gesture made. There are rules about eye contact, rules about tone of voice, rules about asking questions. And the penalty for breaking these rules is swift and final. The enslaved community at Whitmore Plantation quickly learns that certain topics are forbidden. You do not speak about injuries sustained in the fields. You do not mention family members who have disappeared. You do not question why someone was taken to the main house and never returned. You do not ask about the sounds that sometimes come from the barn late at night. And above all, you do not speak to outsiders. When traders come through, when supplies are delivered, when neighboring plantation owners visit, you keep your eyes down and your mouth shut. By 1852, people have been disappearing from Whitmore Plantation for nearly a decade. Sometimes it is someone who complained about the food rations being cut. Sometimes it is someone who was caught teaching others to read. Sometimes it is someone who simply looked at the colonel in a way he did not like. They are taken away, usually at night. Sometimes the story is that they were sold to a trader heading to the deep south. Sometimes there is no story at all. They are simply gone, and asking about them is to invite the same fate. There is a woman named Sarah. She is 26 years old, born on the plantation. Her mother was sold away when Sarah was 8. Her father died in the fields when she was 12. Sarah works in the main house as a chambermaid, which means she sees and hears things that field workers never do. She sees the colonel's ledgers, though she is not supposed to be able to read them. She hears conversations between the colonel and his overseers. She knows things that could get her killed, and Sarah has been keeping a record. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the cabin she shares with 3 other women, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, is a piece of slate. On this slate, scratched in careful letters, are names. 23 names. 23 people who have disappeared from Whitmore Plantation in the past 5 years. Next to each name, a date. And next to some of the dates, a brief note about what the person had done to warrant their removal. Thomas spoke to a traveling minister about conditions. June 1848. Rebecca asked why her child was sold. September 1848. Marcus witnessed an overseer beating. Refused to say he saw nothing. December 1849. The list goes on. Sarah adds to it carefully. Only when she is certain she is alone. Only when she can be absolutely sure no one is watching. She does not know what she will do with this information. She only knows that someone needs to remember, someone needs to bear witness, because at the closed-mouth estate, the colonel's greatest power is not the whip or the chain. It is the ability to make people vanish as if they never existed at all. The summer of 1853 is particularly brutal. The heat rises from the earth in shimmering waves. The cotton plants wilt despite constant irrigation from the river. People collapse in the fields, and the overseers respond not with water, but with threats. Production must not fall. The colonel has debts to pay, investments to protect. Nothing can interfere with the harvest. It is during this summer that Sarah begins to understand the full scope of what is happening at Whitmore Plantation. She is cleaning the colonel's study one afternoon when she finds a letter partially hidden beneath other papers on his desk. She knows she should not read it. She knows the risk, but something compels her to look. The letter is from a doctor in New Orleans. It thanks the colonel for his most recent delivery and confirms payment has been transferred to his account. It mentions that the specimens were in acceptable condition and will be useful for the medical college's anatomical studies. It requests more, particularly younger subjects, as these are most valuable for teaching purposes. Sarah's hands shake as she replaces the letter exactly as she found it. The implication is clear, though her mind rejects it even as understanding dawns. The people who disappear from Whitmore Plantation are not always sold to other plantations. Some of them are being sold to medical schools, their bodies used for dissection and study. This is not uncommon in the South, where medical colleges pay good money for cadavers, and enslaved people who die or disappear provide a convenient supply. But the colonel has gone further. He is not waiting for natural deaths. He is selecting people, creating reasons to remove them, and profiting from their bodies. What do you think about what has been revealed so far? The level of calculated cruelty described here goes beyond what many imagine when they think about this period in history. Does knowing these specific details change how you understand this era? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sarah knows she cannot keep this knowledge to herself, but she also knows that speaking openly would be suicide. Instead, she begins to carefully, methodically share what she knows with a small circle of trusted people. There is Jacob, a skilled blacksmith who has more freedom of movement than most because his work requires him to travel to neighboring plantations for repairs. There is Ruth, an elderly woman who works in the kitchen and has been at Whitmore Plantation longer than anyone else alive. And there is Daniel, a young man who works in the stables and has caught the attention of the colonel's daughter, Elizabeth, a fact that makes him simultaneously valuable and vulnerable. Together, they begin to piece together a larger picture. The colonel's operation is not isolated. He is part of a network. Jacob has heard similar stories from other plantations he visits. Ruth remembers that the previous owner, the colonel's father, had similar arrangements, though on a smaller scale. Daniel has overheard conversations between the colonel and visiting gentlemen, discussions about supply and demand, about quality control, about the importance of discretion. But the network extends beyond plantation owners. The local sheriff, a man named William Crawford, visits Whitmore Plantation regularly. He dines with the colonel, he accepts gifts, and when questions are raised about missing people, when family members from other plantations inquire about loved ones who were supposedly sold to Whitmore, Sheriff Crawford ensures those questions go nowhere. He files no reports. He conducts no investigations. He is, in effect, a paid partner in the colonel's enterprise. The same is true of Dr. Harrison, the physician who occasionally visits the plantation to treat the colonel's family. He has examined enslaved people who later disappeared. He has signed death certificates for people who were not dead. He has provided medical opinions that justify separations, sales, and removals. His signature gives legitimacy to the colonel's decisions, and his silence is purchased with regular payments and professional favors. Even Reverend Thomas, the Baptist minister who preaches at the small church the colonel's family attends, plays a role. He counsels the enslaved population about obedience and acceptance. He quotes scripture about servants obeying their masters. He tells them that their suffering is part of God's plan. And when someone comes to him in private, desperate to report an injustice, he listens with apparent sympathy and then reports the conversation directly to the colonel. The church, which should be a sanctuary, has become another instrument of control. This is the architecture of oppression at its most efficient. It is not just one cruel man. It is an entire system with multiple layers of authority and complicity, all working together to ensure that the truth remains buried. Every potential avenue of help has been closed off. Every institution that might offer protection has been corrupted. The enslaved population at Whitmore Plantation is utterly isolated, trapped not just by physical barriers, but by a carefully constructed social and legal framework designed to ensure their voices are never heard. I want to thank you for staying with this story up to this point. I know this is difficult material to confront, but understanding the true nature of these systems, the calculated and systematic way they operated, is essential to understanding American history. And I promise you, what comes next reveals something even more powerful than the oppression itself. The story of how people resisted, even in the most impossible circumstances. The autumn of 1854 brings change to Whitmore Plantation, though not the kind the colonel anticipates. A man arrives at the plantation presenting himself as a traveling agricultural consultant from Charleston. His name, he says, is James Mitchell. He carries letters of introduction from prominent South Carolina planters. He speaks knowledgeably about cotton varieties, irrigation techniques, and labor management. The colonel, always interested in improving his operations and impressed by the visitor's credentials, invites him to stay for several weeks to observe and make recommendations. But James Mitchell is not who he claims to be. His real name is James Reynolds, and he is a free black man from Pennsylvania working with the emerging abolitionist movement. He has spent 2 years carefully building his false identity, learning everything he can about plantation management, securing forged letters and references. His mission is to infiltrate a major Louisiana plantation, document the conditions, and smuggle that information north where it can be published and used to fuel the anti-slavery cause. Sarah recognizes something different about this man from the moment she sees him. It is the way he looks at people, really sees them, in a way that white visitors never do. It is small gestures, tiny signs that someone who has lived her entire life reading hidden meanings in behavior can detect. She takes an enormous risk. While serving dinner one evening, she manages to drop a small piece of paper near where he sits. On it is written a single word in letters so faint they can barely be seen. Help. Reynolds retrieves the paper without anyone noticing. Over the following days, he and Sarah develop a system of communication, notes hidden in specific locations, coded phrases spoken during routine interactions. Gradually, Sarah shares everything she knows, the names of the disappeared, the letters she has seen, the network of complicity. Reynolds documents it all in a journal hidden in the lining of his travel bag. But they are not the only ones conspiring. Jacob, Ruth, and Daniel have been developing their own form of resistance. They cannot stop the Colonel's operation, but they can bear witness to it. They can create a record. Ruth has been memorizing the names and details of everyone who has disappeared, storing the information in the verses of songs she sings while working. Jacob has been scratching marks into metal pieces he works with, creating a coded ledger that appears to be nothing more than manufacturing flaws. Daniel has been collecting small items belonging to the disappeared, things the Colonel's household discards, creating a hidden archive of physical evidence. The network of resistance expands carefully. A few others are brought into confidence. Information is shared in whispers during the brief moments when overseers are not watching. Plans are made for how to smuggle Reynolds' documentation off the plantation when his visit ends. There is talk of trying to get messages to other plantations, of building a wider network of witnesses, and then everything falls apart. The Colonel's daughter, Elizabeth, who has been developing an increasingly inappropriate attachment to Daniel, follows him one night. She watches as he meets with Sarah and Reynolds behind the stables. She does not understand everything she sees, but she understands enough. She tells her father. The Colonel does not react immediately. He's too calculating for that. Instead, he watches. He waits. He allows the conspiracy to continue for several more days, observing who is involved, how they communicate, what they are planning. He wants to identify everyone before he acts. And late one night in November, he makes his move. Reynolds is taken first, seized in his room by the overseer and two hired men from town. His belongings are searched. The journal is found. Then Sarah is dragged from her cabin. Then Jacob. Then Daniel. Then 5 others whose involvement the Colonel has confirmed through his observation. They are all taken to the barn, the same barn that has been the site of so many disappearances before. What happens in that barn over the next 3 days is documented in a single source, a letter written by the Colonel's wife Margaret to her sister in Mobile. The letter, discovered in a family archive more than 100 years later, is remarkable for its casual cruelty. Margaret describes the situation as her husband dealing with a nest of troublemakers. She mentions that he has been quite firm in his correction. She notes that the problem has been thoroughly resolved, and she complains that the disruption has interfered with her plans for a holiday party. When the barn doors finally open, only one person emerges alive. Daniel is released, beaten nearly to death, as a message to everyone else. The others are gone. The official story is that they attempted to escape and were sold to a trader heading to Texas, but everyone on the plantation knows the truth. They know what happens to people who speak up at the closed-mouth estate. Daniel survives his ordeal, though he is never the same. He carries the physical and psychological scars for the rest of his life. He never speaks about what happened in the barn. He never speaks about Sarah or Jacob or Ruth or any of the others. He lives in absolute silence until 1865, when Union troops arrive and the plantation system collapses. Colonel Whitmore does not face justice for his crimes, As the Confederacy falls, he burns his records and flees to Mexico, taking as much wealth as he can carry. He dies there in 1868, never having answered for what he did. His wife Margaret returns to Louisiana after his death and lives comfortably on money hidden during the war. The plantation itself is divided and sold to various buyers during Reconstruction. The main house stands empty for years before being purchased by a lumber company that has no interest in its history. For decades, the story of what happened at Whitmore Plantation exists only in the memories of survivors and their descendants. Daniel, before his death in 1891, tells his grandchildren fragments of the story. Other survivors carry their own pieces of the truth. But there is no official record, no acknowledgement, no memorial. Then, in 1973, archaeologists conducting a survey of historical plantation sites in Louisiana begin excavating the area where Whitmore Plantation once stood. The main house is long gone, demolished in the 1920s, but the foundations remain, and so do other structures, including the barn. Beneath the floor of that barn, investigators discover something that transforms historical understanding of the site. They find remains, 27 sets of human remains, buried in shallow graves, showing evidence of severe trauma. The discovery prompts a full forensic investigation. Over the following years, more remains are found in various locations around the former plantation. In total, 41 individuals are recovered. The forensic evidence tells a story that matches the scattered testimonies that have survived. Signs of malnutrition, evidence of untreated injuries, trauma consistent with extreme violence, and in several cases, marks that suggest the bodies were subject to dissection after death. The Medical College in New Orleans, when finally pressured to open its historical archives, confirms that it purchased cadavers from various sources during the 1850s, including from suppliers in the Baton Rouge area. While specific records naming Whitmore do not survive, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. In 2003, a descendant of Daniel comes forward with a metal box that has been passed down through his family. Inside is the slate that Sarah kept with its list of names. Also in the box are several small personal items: a button, a piece of fabric, a child's wooden toy. These are the items Daniel managed to preserve from the hidden archive he and the others created. Finally, there is a single page, water-stained and fragile, covered in tiny, careful handwriting. It is a copy of part of James Reynolds's journal, transcribed by Sarah before his capture. The page describes in detail the colonel's arrangements with the medical school and names several of the people who participated in the network of complicity. This physical evidence, combined with the archaeological findings and the historical records that do exist, provides confirmation of what happened at the closed-mouth estate. This was not an isolated incident. Similar operations existed at other plantations throughout the South. The sale of enslaved people's bodies to medical schools was a documented practice. The networks of complicity involving law enforcement, medical professionals, and religious authorities were common. What makes Whitmore Plantation significant is that we have documentation, we have evidence, we have names. Today, the site where Whitmore Plantation once stood is marked by a memorial erected in 2011. It lists the names recovered from Sarah's slate and the names of those identified through archaeological evidence. 41 names in total, though it is believed many more victims exist whose names are lost to history. The memorial describes what happened there not as an anomaly, but as an example of the systematic violence that characterized the institution of slavery. The story of the closed-mouth estate is a reminder that history is not just about the broad sweep of events, but about individual lives, individual choices, individual acts of courage and cruelty. It reminds us that silence is often not neutral, but complicit. It shows us that even in the most oppressive circumstances, people resist, people document, people refuse to let the truth die completely. And it challenges us to ask uncomfortable questions about our present. What injustices are we silent about today? What systems of oppression do we participate in, even passively? What truths are we afraid to speak because of the consequences? The people who disappeared from Whitmore Plantation between 1848 and 1854 are no longer forgotten. Their names are known, their story is told. And while justice was never served in their lifetimes, the truth they tried so desperately to preserve has finally come to light. What do you think about this story? About the courage of people like Sarah, Jacob, Ruth, and Daniel, who risked everything to document the truth? About the systems of complicity that made such atrocities possible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. These conversations matter. These stories matter. If you found this account valuable, please subscribe to this channel. We are committed to bringing you historical stories that are often overlooked, told with the depth and respect they deserve. Click the notification bell so you do not miss our upcoming videos. And when you are ready, watch the next recommended video, where we continue exploring the hidden histories of the American South, the stories of resistance, survival, and the long struggle for justice that continues to this day. Thank you for bearing witness to this history with us.